So, second day of this summer retreat. Yesterday I was reading Nyala Pema text. I forgot what the title was. Advice on the view, meditation, action, and fruition, which made the specific point of Rikpa as the main thing, the heart and soul of all Dharma practice. And this text that I'm going to read is also by Nyala Pema. And the title is Signs that the Common Preliminary Practices Have Penetrated the Mind. Sit in a good posture, first of all, always. Signs that the common preliminary practices have penetrated the mind. So, if you can devote your body unstintingly to the practice, that is a sign of taking to heart the preciousness of the freedoms and advantages. If you can view gold and dirt with equanimity and see them as equal, that is a sign of having realized the illusory nature of transient things. If you can regard the phenomena of samsara as your enemies, that is a sign of crossing over the ocean of suffering. If you can pay meticulous attention to your actions and their effects, adopting virtue and abandoning non-virtue, that is a sign of finding the swift path that ascends the staircase to liberation. If you can purify the negativity, defilements, and habitual tendencies of your body, speech, and mind, that is a sign of closing the door to rebirth in samsara's lower realms. If you can keep the three jewels in your mind so that they are never separate from it, that is a sign of being hooked by the compassion of the Supreme Refuge. If you know how to integrate emptiness and compassion in your mind stream, that is a sign of bringing phenomena into the essence of awakening. If you can meditate on how all beings have been our parents, that is a sign of the arising of the sun and moon of the great vehicle. If you can dispel the obscurations of the darkness of ignorance, that is a sign of the dawning of clear light within immaculate space. If you can carry the two accumulations, which are virtue in action and wisdom through meditation, onto the path continuously, that is a sign of the maturing of the fruition of kayas or bodies and wisdoms. If you can see all that appears and exists arising in total purity as the Lama, that is a sign of reaching the pinnacle of Dzogchen Yoga. If you can recognize the Vajra Kaya, Vajra body of all penetrating pure awareness, that is a sign of transference into the timeless space of primordial purity. If you can recognize the unity of the three bodies, kayas, in pure awareness, that is a sign of the ripening of the fruition, which is Samantabhadra or Kuntu. This brief summary of the signs showing that the common preliminary practices have penetrated the mind was written in response to repeated requests from the assembly of my students by the old beggar called Duddul. Through this merit, may all beings be matured and liberated. Let those words sink in for a few moments. Again, Nyala Pema Duddul's presence can be felt. What a pleasure. Welcome, welcome. Always in Guru Yoga, when receiving blessings, and especially in this case, receiving pointing out, be very sincere. Heart open, honest, sincere. Master Nyala Pema transmission and pointing out continues. I don't really want to interfere with it. So let's keep it going. Take your yoga mat and lie down. your body, feel the breath in it. Then move. We'll continue sitting a little bit. I would like to continue a little bit before afternoon tea and break. I came to think of, first of all, my sincere gratitude to Nyala Pema again. It's very, very precious gift to receive, pointing out like this. It has happened on, well, many retreats before. This is my 11th year of teaching, and throughout the years in Open Heart we have worked with Hindu Mahasiddhas, and for the last 5-6 years with Buddhist Mahasiddhas. And well, from the top of my head, I can remember that on summer retreat of 2017, I think I was reading some Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche's teachings, I think. And then Dilgo Khyentse's picture is here. And he was a recently lived Tibetan Buddhist master, Mahasiddha, if you ask me. And he, like Nyala Pema today and yesterday, he also showed up at least on couple days, I think. And I remember that on the very first retreat that I taught here in UK, which was the winter retreat of 2017-18, there was, we were practicing Guru Yoga, I think Guru Rinpoche's Guru Yoga, but then it felt like, some other, great masters from the Mahasiddha family just wanted to show up and, meet the new Sangha members from the old Dharma Mind group. So I remember that there was couple of Hindu Mahasiddhas, Agastya and Bogarnath, at least. I forgot if there were others, but this it's really strong blessings, just like today. And so, just a moment ago, I was lying down there and was thinking that, pointing out instructions. If you're not familiar with the term, it means that a master or a teacher points out the nature of mind. It can happen through, verbally describing it, kind of the teacher, the Lama talking you into that experience, or reading a poem for you, talking you into that experience through a poem, or singing you into it. These are the traditional ways. It can happen through art. We were talking about Dharma art, spiritual art, Buddhist art. It can happen through viewing art, and I imagine it can happen through any, type of expression. Dance, also. So that's one type of pointing out. Another pointing out is through experience. And essentially it's still experience, but the way how Nyala, Pema Doodle today and Dilgo Khyentse 2 years ago and throughout the years, different masters have used this kind of direct transmission style. So it's just, instead of describing it, it's like this, and it's you have it, I'm describing it to you, how it feels, blah, blah, blah. It's like, this is the experience. And, as you can all feel, it's, when it's pointed out like this by a Mahasiddha, it's, I can at least say from my own experience that it's not my daily experience. I'm still a samsaric being, so my daily meditation is not like that. It is so much more rich, so much more flavor. I remember days when it was sort of like when the pointing out came, the transmission came. It was sort of like turning the volume knob of clarity, like all of a sudden, whoosh, your mind became super clear. Nowadays, recently in my own practice, it has more been like the richness, the flavors of it, instead of clarity. But so the reason I'm talking about this is because I've had the immense fortune of having those transmissions for many years, since I started Tantric Guru Yoga in 2006, and actually from my childhood. Although as a child I didn't know what it was, I just had the experience through visitations of masters. But the point here is that it is experience that they transmit. They don't give you a book. Here's a book, read it. It's an experience, because it's an experience that we need. It's an experience that fulfills us. It is experience that removes our confusion. A mere description, mere words from his lips or from his text wouldn't be enough. Although that can also be very helpful. We all have read spiritual books and got a lot of inspiration and direction through them. But it is this pointing out instruction that is really the heart and soul of Vajrayana tradition. And Vajrayana, as you might know, is the is the, you know, within Buddhism there are these different vehicles. Small vehicle, Hinayana, a great vehicle, Mahayana, which is more advanced in practices and teachings. And then there's Vajrayana on top of Mahayana, the great vehicle, Vajrayana, which means like diamond or indestructible vehicle, which is the most demanding, but also most efficient vehicle. So pointing out is really the tip of that pyramid. That is the experience, in history. When somebody wanted to practice, somebody was a seeker and they traveled from the other side of Tibet or from China or Japan or wherever. They were seekers, so they wanted to find a teacher or a master who could teach them, who could help them in their existential confusion. And these ladies and gentlemen, they, walk all through China and Mongolia and India and Sri Lanka and wherever, thousands of kilometers. And then they find a guy or a girl, master, who knows it. But then, the master, I would assume in most cases at least, they don't give it like that. They test you first. Might be a few years, might be 10 years before they point it out. And this is why, this is the history of pointing out instructions in Vajrayana tradition. So, you might, the student, still nowadays, there are, most lamas, they require their students to do all these preliminary practices and tantric practices before they are given pointing out instructions. Not all lamas follow that guideline, but that's the traditional way, I guess I could say. But anyway, this pointing out is really the tip of the pyramid of the whole thing, and it's a transmission of experience. And that I find is very interesting. So what it essentially is that a master comes. Some are fortunate to have masters in physical body. In Open Heart, we don't have a master in physical body, but we have the fortune to practice Tantric Guru Yoga and have these blessings come spontaneously, like Nyala, Pema doodles today. But the master comes and gives the pointing out, which is essentially the experience is that, okay, here's you, like the perfect version of you. This is the experience. And you get it. You receive it. Right? So, from there, in this experience, when we can repeat it through our own practice and have the fortune of it getting pointed out in our practice, also in Open Heart, we have the really extreme fortune to have these bhumi openings, because just receiving pointing out from a master doesn't mean that you open bhumis. So, to have the opportunity to combine the two, to both open bhumis all the way to Mahasiddha bhumis when it becomes your default mode, and it getting pointed out, it's like how many flies? Dozen flies with one blow. It's really, really a waterproof way of doing it. I remember happened to remember the story that I recently read of a Tibetan Kempo or an abbot. This monk was an this happened just recently, like in Tibet or Nepal, I don't know which one. But there was this Kempo or an abbot who are doctors of Tibetan Buddhism. So they have studied the whole monastic system, went through many, many years of training, and became abbots of a monastery. And there was a story of a Kempo who studied with the Dzogchen Lama, who gave out pointing out, and this Kempo kept going to this Lama for, it was mentioned that it was few hundred times until he got it. Few hundred times meeting somebody who gives it to you, points it out, and then eventually, it switches on so that you get it, it doesn't leave you. So that was the story, and I contemplated it, and I, thought that he probably didn't go to meet the Dzogchen master, a few hundred times, 200-300 times on consecutive days. Probably not even weeks. I don't know where the Lama lived, if he lived next door or if he lived far away, or she. I don't know if it was a man or a woman, but so it wasn't mentioned how long it took for him to get those few hundred pointing outs, but it could have been 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or more. I don't know. But if there was distance, if it was only possible to meet the Lama once a month, for example, it takes time. It just, time, the wheel of time keeps churning. And this is certainly true. I don't at all mean to say this disrespectfully. I've practiced in traditional ways myself in this life and in many previous lives, and I think all practice is good, but the reason I'm saying this is only because methods are not perfect, and methods have room for new innovation and refreshment. So, what in open heart, not estimate, the middle value, how do you say that? Average of what it takes for average practitioner to get to Mahasiddha Bhumis is something like 2 years. The fastest person did it in 2.5 months. The longest it took for somebody who was myself, it took 5 years from the opening of the first Bhumi, from 1st to 11th. So that is relatively a very, very short period of time, average of 2 years of practice. I practiced 8.5 years without no Bhumi openings at all, and I was sitting 8 hours every single day. So I don't mean it disrespectfully at all, but this just doesn't happen in established systems. It just doesn't. But I hope, that people would have that opportunity. But nevertheless, this, I was talking about this pointing out. So the Dzogchen tradition, as well as our method, prioritizes this nature of mind, or Buddha nature, that we all have. We prioritize its recognition from the start, because that's really the it gives the, when we start accumulating those recognitions, glimpses, glimpse means that it is an experience of clarity that starts and then it passes. But even if it's 1 second, 2 seconds, it makes a big difference. So we start accumulating those glimpses of the natural state, and because we use dynamic concentration, we also have these shifts or bumi openings, shifts of perception. And that's how our method works. And having said that, I read this text by Nyala, Pema, signs that the common preliminary practices have penetrated the mind. So I was thinking about our preliminary practices. We have common preliminaries relating to ethics and philosophical tools. Then we have Dzogchen preliminaries. We have Sutric preliminaries and Tantric preliminaries. 36 in number at the moment. There's still a dozen or so to be added to the list. So it is commonly said that ethics is the first and last training, which means that in my experience, we have the ethics of honesty and non-harming on that list of preliminaries. So I think it's absolutely necessary and essential to make those, to create that foundation of ethics in practice. Honesty, not lying, not misleading, and non-harming, non-violence. I think it's absolutely necessary. And this happens through contemplating them, just making it a principle to yourself that I'm not going to bullshit myself, I'm not going to bullshit, I'm not going to lie to others. I will be honest and sincere. And also not harming. I will not harm others purposefully. And if I lash out, have a fit of rage, then trying to become aware of such situations, so that it wouldn't keep happening. This is ethical contemplation. But what is interesting is that I was talking about the experience of the natural state, is that all these practices, Dzogchen practices, techniques, Sutric techniques, Tantric techniques, and these common preliminaries, ethical guidelines, philosophy, it all comes from that natural state. All of these doctrines and teachings that Buddhism teaches, that other religions teach, come from that natural state. Comes from that experience that Nyala, Pema today transmitted to us. Isn't that something? So again here, as I said, it's necessary to practice, to contemplate, for example, ethics alongside doing yogic practice. But when my experience is that what was the phrase that Nyala, Pema used? When we gain stability of the natural state, then it should come automatically. Because if you really are in your Buddha nature, in your wakeful nature, I'm talking about somebody who's a Mahasiddha. They will not have neuroses and traumas. All that will be washed away. And because of that, a Mahasiddha won't do stupid stuff. or abuse others. You know? This is how I understand it and how I teach it. So it's a curious thing. I think I will just leave it there that it is interesting that as I was talking about the vehicles of Buddhism and how pointing out instructions is the very, the most sought after teaching. It points to an experience of our wakeful nature, our perfect wakeful nature, and that everything else comes out of it. And because everything else comes out of it, in principle, all those teachings are very useful and precious. Let's sit we are a little over time, so let's sit 1 minute. Okay, join hands. A quick question. How many here have had Open Heart Yoga Advanced Empowerment? I think Luke, Manus, Monica. I don't know how you've gotten it. And John and Carl and myself. I was thinking of, for this group who have advanced deities, I was thinking of arranging a practice session where we can do some deity practice of those deities. So I was going to ask James if you could start the 6 o'clock session and lead it for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, around that time, using the timer, so that we do that practice in my room from 6. Would it be okay? Yeah. So those of you who have the advanced empowerment, see you in room number 11 at 6. Thank you.